Hello, future officers. Feeling overwhelmed by ancient history? Does the name Rig Vedic Age make your head spin? Don't worry, I've got your back. Today we're going to travel back in time, around 1500 to 1000 BCE, and explore the early Vedic period, but in a way that's fun, engaging, and most importantly, will stick in your memory for the Prelims and Mains. Let's ditch the boring textbook method and actually understand the life, society, and beliefs of the early Aryans. First things first, why is it called the Rig Vedic Age? Simple. Our primary source of information for this period is the Rig Veda, the oldest of the four Vedas. Imagine it as the OG text, a collection of 1,028 hymns dedicated to various gods. The people who composed these hymns called themselves Aryans. Now, the word Aryan isn't about race. It refers to a linguistic group, people who spoke Indo-Aryan languages. They were semi-nomadic pastoralists, which is a fancy way of saying they were cattle herders who moved around. For them, cattle was wealth. Gai, or cow, was so important that many terms were derived from it. A wealthy person was a gomat, and the king was called a gopati, or protector of cows. Even wars known as gavishti were often fought for cattle. So if you see a question linking wealth and wars to cattle in the early Vedic period, you know the answer. Let's talk about their geography. The Rig Veda gives us clues about where they lived. It frequently mentions the Sapta Sindhu region, which means the land of 7 rivers. This includes the Indus and its 5 tributaries, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej, plus the ancient Saraswati River. So, their heartland was primarily in present-day Punjab and its surrounding areas. They were familiar with the Himalayas, but not so much with the regions south of the Yamuna. Now, let's look at their social life. The society was largely tribal and egalitarian. The basic social unit was the kula, or family, headed by a kulapa. Several families formed a grama village. Several villages formed a vis clan. And the highest political unit was the jana, or tribe. We hear names like the Bharatas, Purus, Yadus, and Turvashas. The famous Battle of 10 Kings, or Dasharajna Yuddha, mentioned in the Rig Veda, was fought between the Bharata king Sudas and a confederacy of 10 other tribes on the banks of the river Parushni, which is modern-day Ravi. Guess who won? Sudas of the Bharata tribe. Was there a caste system? Not in the rigid way we see later. The varna system was just beginning to emerge. The famous Purusha Sukta hymn in the 10th book, or mandala, of the Rig Veda mentions the 4 varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, originating from the mouth, arms, thighs, and feet of the primeval man, Purusha. However, scholars believe this 10th book was a later addition. In the earlier parts of the Rig Veda, society was based more on occupation than birth. There's even a hymn where a person says, "I am a poet, my father is a physician, and my mother is a grinder of corn." This shows social mobility was possible. What about the status of women? It was actually quite good, much better than in later periods. Women could attend assemblies, they participated in rituals with their husbands, and some even composed hymns. We have names of women poets like Apala, Viswavara, and Gosha. There was no child marriage, and women could even choose their husbands in a practice called Svayamvara. Widow remarriage was also permitted. Let's move on to their political structure. The head of the tribe, the Rajan, or king, wasn't an absolute monarch. His main job was to protect the tribe and its cattle. He was assisted by several functionaries. The most important one was the Purohita, or chief priest. Then you had the Senani, the army chief. The king's authority was also limited by popular tribal assemblies like the sabha and the samiti. The sabha was a smaller body of elders, while the samiti was a broader general assembly of the tribe. Women could attend the sabha. These assemblies had a real say in the tribe's affairs, including the election of the king. Economically, as we said, it was a pastoral and cattle-rearing economy. Agriculture was secondary. The main grain they cultivated was yava, which is barley. They didn't have a concept of private land ownership. The land was owned collectively by the tribe. There were no regular taxes and no standing army. People gave voluntary offerings called bali to the king. Trade was based on the barter system, with the cow being the standard unit of value. Finally, let's talk about religion. The Rig Vedic people personified natural forces and worshipped them as gods. They didn't build temples or worship idols. Their religion was all about sacrifices or yajnas performed in the open air to please the gods and get boons like cattle, sons, and victory in wars. Who were the main gods? Indra was the most important, the god of thunder and rain, also called Purandara, or breaker of forts. He has the most hymns dedicated to him in the Rig Veda. Next in line was Agni, the fire god, who acted as an intermediary between gods and men. Offerings made to Agni were believed to be carried to the gods. Then there was Varuna, who upheld the cosmic order, or Rita. Other gods included Surya, the sun god, Soma, the god of plants, and goddesses like Usha, the goddess of dawn. Their religion was optimistic and they prayed for well-being in this life, not for salvation or moksha. Alright, theory is done. Now for the fun part. Let's see how this knowledge applies to actual UPSC questions. Here's a previous year question from the Civil Services Prelims. The religion of early Vedic Aryans was primarily of, and the options are A, Bhakti, B, image worship and yajnas, C, worship of nature and yajnas, D, worship of nature and bhakti. Think for a moment. What did we just discuss? Did they worship idols? No. Was bhakti or intense personal devotion the main feature? Not really, that came much later. Their main focus was on personified natural forces, sun, wind, thunder, and performing yajnas or sacrifices. So the correct answer is C, worship of nature and yajnas. See? Super easy when you know the concepts. Let's try another one. This is a common mock question style, with reference to the difference between the culture of Rigvedic Aryans and Indus Valley people. Which of the following statements are correct? 1. Rigvedic Aryans used the coat of mail and helmet in warfare, whereas the people of Indus Valley civilization did not leave any evidence of using them. 2. Rigvedic Aryans knew gold, silver, and copper, whereas Indus people knew only copper and iron. 3. Rigvedic Aryans had domesticated the horse, whereas there is no conclusive evidence of the horse having been domesticated by the Indus Valley people. Let's break it down. Statement 1. We know the Aryans were a martial people. They had chariots and were into warfare, so using armor like helmets makes sense. The Indus Valley people, on the other hand, seem to have been more peaceful, with very few weapons found. So statement 1 seems correct. Statement 2. Rigvedic Aryans knew gold, silver, and copper. Correct. But did the Indus people only know copper and iron? They definitely knew copper and even bronze. But iron? Iron was not known to the Harappans. In fact, iron came into widespread use much later, in the later Vedic period. So statement 2 is incorrect. Statement 3. The horse was central to the Aryan lifestyle, for their chariots and mobility. The evidence for horses in the Indus Valley is scarce and debated. So it's fair to say the horse was domesticated and widely used by the Aryans, but not by the IVC people. So statement 3 is also correct. Therefore, the correct statements are 1 and 3. This is how you need to analyze and eliminate options in the exam. Let's do one more quick mock question. Consider the following statements regarding the Rig Vedic society. 1. The society was strictly patriarchal. 2. Child marriage was a common practice. 3. The Purohita was the most important functionary who assisted the king. Let's evaluate. Statement 1. The family was headed by the father, so it was patriarchal. The Kulapa was the male head. This is correct. Statement 2. Child marriage was common? We just learned the opposite. Women had a good status. There was no child marriage, and practices like Svayamvara existed. So this is incorrect. Statement 3. Was the Purohita the most important functionary? Yes. The chief priest held a very high position and advised the king. This is correct. So, statements 1 and 3 are correct. See how a clear understanding of the basics helps you tackle even tricky questions? The key is to not just memorize facts, but to build a story, a mental picture of how these people lived. They were pastoral, cattle-loving, tribe-dwelling people who worshipped nature and fought wars on horse-drawn chariots. Their society was simple, egalitarian, and led by a king whose power was checked by assemblies. That's your crash course on the Rig Vedic Age. We've covered their geography, society, polity, economy, and religion, and even solve some questions. I hope this made ancient history a little less intimidating and a lot more interesting. Keep revising, keep practicing, and you'll ace it. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more such content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.